Look at that old faker with his grocery store tattoo. Probably bought it at a novelty shop to scam free meals. The words sliced through Murphy's Diner like a knife on that quiet Sunday morning. Walter Reed, 78 years old, sat hunched over his veterans' discount breakfast, pretending the mockery didn't touch him. His faded anchor and dagger tattoo told stories he could never share. Classified missions. 47 SEALs brought home alive. A Medal of Honor citation buried so deep in Pentagon files that even he couldn't access it anymore. But sitting there in his flannel shirt and worn jeans, he looked like just another forgotten old man trying to stretch a fixed income. What Walter didn't know was that a Harley-Davidson was pulling into the parking lot outside, and the man dismounting that motorcycle would recognize what everyone else had missed. The question was, would recognition come too late to matter? Walter Reed's life had always been defined by silence. Not the peaceful kind, but the operational kind. The kind that keeps classified missions classified and brothers in arms alive. He'd served as G7 with SEAL Team Bravo during an era when America fought wars the public would never fully understand. Operation Swift Current remained locked in classified files 40 years later, but the results spoke for themselves. Walter had designed underwater demolition techniques that became standard protocol for every naval special operation that followed. His extraction methods had revolutionized how SEALs pulled teams from impossible situations. During 3 days behind enemy lines in Vietnam, Walter's protocols had saved 47 SEALs who would have otherwise been left for dead. The Pentagon had awarded him the Medal of Honor for those actions, but the ceremony happened in a classified briefing room with only 7 people present. No newspaper articles, no hometown parade, no moment of public recognition that might compromise ongoing operations. That silence had followed him into civilian life. Millbrook was the kind of small American town where church bells rang every Sunday morning and Main Street flew the flag from every storefront. It was a place where everybody knew everybody, or at least thought they did. After Walter's wife Martha passed 5 years ago, Sunday mornings became the hardest part of his week. The house felt too empty, the silence too loud. So he'd started a routine. Every Sunday at 9 in the morning, he'd drive to Murphy's Diner and order the Veterans Special. 2 eggs, bacon, toast, and coffee for $6.50 with his military discount. He always sat in the same corner booth, the one with clear sight lines to all entrances and exits. Old habits from decades of tactical operations died hard. For 3 years, this routine had been his only regular human contact. Sarah Harrington, the young waitress whose grandfather had served in Vietnam, always treated him kindly. She'd bring his coffee without asking and remember that he liked his eggs over easy. But she had no idea who he really was. Nobody did. The auto shop Walter had owned for 30 years was barely staying afloat. His military pension covered basic necessities, but nothing more. His daughter lived in California with grandchildren who knew him only through occasional video calls as the quiet grandpa who didn't talk much. He'd tried joining the local veterans of foreign wars posts, but his inability to discuss his actual service made him seem like support personnel rather than combat veteran. The other men swapped stories about their deployments. Walter could only nod and stay quiet. Operational security wasn't something you retired from, it was a lifetime commitment. So he remained invisible. A ghost sitting in plain sight, eating breakfast alone while the world moved on around him, unaware that one of the most decorated SEALs in naval history was sitting in a corner booth, using a veteran's discount to afford eggs and bacon. This Sunday morning started like all the others, until it didn't. The trouble started when 4 men in expensive golf attire walked into Murphy's Diner with the loud confidence of people who'd never faced real adversity. They were the type Walter had encountered throughout his civilian life. Soft hands, soft bodies. Voices that carried because they'd never learned the value of tactical silence. They claimed a large booth near the window and immediately began commenting on other customers with the casual cruelty of men who'd never been held accountable. Walter noticed them assessing him. He'd spent 60 years reading body language and threat levels. These men weren't dangerous in the operational sense, but they were dangerous in another way. They represented the kind of entitled ignorance that dismissed sacrifice it couldn't understand. "Look at that old faker with his grocery store tattoo," one of them said, loud enough to carry across the diner. "Probably bought it at a novelty shop to scam free meals. Real veterans don't need handouts." The other 3 laughed. One added, "Most of these guys never saw combat anyway. They just want attention and free breakfast." Walter's grip tightened on his coffee cup, but his face remained neutral. He'd endured interrogation training that made this mockery seem trivial. Yet somehow, this cut deeper than enemy interrogators ever had. Those men had been trying to break him for strategic reasons. These men were dismissing his entire life's service for entertainment. Sarah Harrington looked stricken as she refilled Walter's coffee. Her grandfather had taught her to respect all veterans, but she was 19 years old and lacked the authority to challenge customers who were spending more money than Walter's $6.50 breakfast. The situation escalated when Kevin Walsh, the diner manager, approached Walter's booth. His expression carried the apologetic discomfort of someone about to commit an injustice while convincing himself it was necessary. "Mr. Reed," Walsh said quietly, though his voice carried to nearby tables, "I need you to move to the patio seating. Your presence is making other customers uncomfortable." The words struck Walter like physical blows. After 3 years of quiet patronage, respectful behavior, and always leaving a tip he couldn't really afford, he was being ejected because strangers had decided his appearance didn't match their expectations of military service. Walter gathered his cane, his newspaper, and what remained of his dignity. He nodded once and moved toward the patio without protest. Operational discipline prevented any emotional display that might escalate the confrontation. Behind him, he heard one of the golf players say, "That's how you handle freeloaders." Probably never served a day in his life. The patio was less comfortable than the indoor booth, colder, more isolated. Through the windows, Walter could see the four men celebrating their victory, raising coffee cups in mock salute. For the first time since Martha's funeral, Walter felt tears. Threatened. Not from anger, but from the crushing weight of invisibility. He'd spent his entire adult life protecting people's freedom to live comfortable lives. And now those same people were mocking him as a fraud. He stared at his cooling eggs and wondered if this was how his story would end, alone, dismissed, and forgotten. Then he heard the rumble of a motorcycle engine. The Harley-Davidson that pulled into Murphy's Diner parking lot wasn't just any motorcycle. It was a statement, a declaration. The deep thunder of its engine cut through the Sunday morning quiet and made every head in the diner turn toward the windows. Marcus Rodriguez dismounted with the fluid efficiency of someone who'd spent years in tactical situations. At 45 years old, he carried 220 pounds of muscle on a 6'2" frame. His leather vest displayed Hell's Angels colors, but also something more: military insignia, combat patches, the kind of decorations that told stories to those who knew how to read them. Tank, as his brothers called him, had served with SEAL Team 6 for 12 years before transitioning to civilian life. The Hells Angels had given him a new brotherhood when military structure ended, but he'd never stopped being a warrior. He'd never stopped recognizing his own kind. He'd stopped at Murphy's Diner for coffee, nothing more. But as he removed his helmet and scanned the area with automatic tactical awareness, his eyes locked on the solitary figure sitting on the patio. Something about the old man's posture triggered recognition, not of the person, but of the bearing. The way he held himself despite obvious age and injury. The specific way he observed his surroundings, even while appearing to focus on his breakfast. Tank's eyes dropped to the man's forearm and the faded tattoo visible below his rolled-up flannel sleeve. His breath caught. No, it couldn't be. He moved closer, his experienced eyes reading details that civilians would miss. The specific design of that anchor and dagger, the particular placement, the way scar tissue had distorted the edges in patterns consistent with combat injuries from decades past. "Holy shit," Tank whispered. Walter looked up from his breakfast, meeting the biker's gaze with the steady composure that had served him through countless high-pressure situations. But there was something in this man's expression that was different from every civilian interaction he'd endured for the past decade. This man saw him. "Sir," Tank said quietly, his voice carrying across the suddenly silent patio. "Are you Walter Reed?" "Right." "Call sign G7, SEAL Team Bravo?" The question shattered 40 years of operational silence. Inside the diner, conversation stopped completely. The golf players watched with obvious confusion as this leather-clad biker addressed their victim with reverence that bordered on awe. "How do you know that name?" Walter asked, his voice carrying the authority that had once commanded respect in the world's most dangerous operations. Tank's response came with military precision. "Sir, I'm Marcus Rodriguez, former SEAL Team 6. Your extraction protocol saved my life in Afghanistan. Your underwater demolition techniques are still taught in advanced training. You're a legend, sir." The word legend hung in the air like a detonation. Every instinct told Walter to deny it, deflect. It maintained the operational security that had protected classified missions for 6 decades. But Tank's specific knowledge and obvious authentic military background suggested that his legend status within the special operations community had transcended classification levels through informal channels that honored genuine heroes. Tank came to attention and delivered a textbook military salute. The Hells Angel biker was honoring the elderly veteran with formal military respect that demonstrated authentic understanding of sacrifice and service. "Sir," Tank said formally, "it's an honor to meet you. Your service saved my brothers and taught us how to bring everyone home." The salute lasted 30 seconds, long enough for everyone in Murphy's diner to understand they were witnessing something sacred. Walter slowly stood, and despite his age and walking cane, his posture straightened into the command presence that had once led the most dangerous missions in naval special operations. He returned the salute with precision that revealed his true military bearing. Then Sarah Harrington emerged from the diner, tears streaming down her face carrying a worn photograph. "Mr. Reed," she said, her voice breaking, "my grandfather left this for me before he died. He said if I ever met you, I should show you this." The photograph showed two young SEALs in Vietnam-era gear standing beside underwater demolition equipment. Walter recognized himself immediately. More importantly, he recognized James Harrington, Sarah's grandfather, one of the 47 SEALs whose life he'd saved during Operation Swift Current. "Grandpa Jimmy always said you were the reason he came home," Sarah continued, "the reason he got to meet my grandmother and start our family. He talked about you until the day he died. He called you the silent hero." Walter's composure finally broke. He stared at the young faces in the photograph, himself and Jimmy, both believing they were invincible, both committed to bringing everyone home alive. "Jimmy Harrington," Walter whispered, "best demolitions expert I ever worked with." Tank was already recording on his phone, his military instincts recognizing this as a moment that needed to be preserved. "Sir, with your permission, I'd like to share this story with my brothers. The military community needs to know you're here." Manager Walsh finally found his voice. "Mr. Reed, I am so sorry. Please let me move you back inside. To our best table, your meals are free here forever." But Tank was already posting to social media. His message was simple but powerful. "Today I met a real American hero, Walter Reed, SEAL Team Bravo. This man saved 47 of our brothers and designed tactics we still use today. He was eating alone, disrespected by civilians who don't know what real sacrifice looks like. Respect our veterans." He included the photograph of young Walter and Jimmy, plus current photos of himself saluting Walter on the diner patio. Within minutes, the post began, spreading like wildfire through military social networks. Tank's post reached 2 million people within 48 hours. Hells Angels chapters from across the country began planning visits to Murphy's diner. Local news stations requested interviews. The Pentagon, while unable to declassify specific operations, issued a statement confirming Walter's distinguished service with significant impact on current special operations protocols. Manager Kevin Walsh was fired by corporate ownership after complaints flooded in about his treatment of Walter. The golf players issued public apologies that rang hollow compared to their earlier mockery. Murphy's Diner renamed Walter's corner booth with a permanent plaque that read, "Reserved for Walter Reed, American Hero." The street where his struggling auto shop stood was renamed Silent Service Way, acknowledging classified veterans whose contributions remained largely invisible. But the most important change was what happened to Walter himself. His weekly breakfast at Murphy's became a gathering point for veterans, active military on leave, and community members seeking to understand authentic service. Tank established a program called Rolling Recognition, where Hells Angels visited isolated veterans across the country. Sarah Harrington became like a granddaughter to Walter, and through his memories, she learned about her grandfather's service in ways that brought Jimmy's sacrifice to life for her own children. Most importantly, Walter discovered that his greatest service to his country might be his civilian advocacy, using his newfound visibility to ensure other forgotten veterans received recognition and support they deserved. Sometimes the greatest heroes sit quietly among us, their most important contributions hidden by the very secrecy that made their service effective. True recognition comes from those who understand that authentic sacrifice doesn't advertise itself. And sometimes angels wear leather to protect forgotten legends. If Walter's journey touched your heart today, please leave your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever met a quiet hero whose story deserved to be heard? Share this video to honor all the silent veterans who served in shadows so we could live in the light. And don't forget to subscribe to BR Veteran Stories for more powerful tales of courage, sacrifice, and the unbreakable bonds of military brotherhood. These stories matter. These heroes matter. Let's make sure they're never forgotten again.